21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. The state rested last week before the weekend. We're going to continue on in trial now with the defense case in chief. The court would note the jurors are all properly seated, and the court has received the juror affirmations signed by each one of our jurors for following the court's continuing instruction as we broke for the weekend. So thank you again, each of you, for following that instruction as you have throughout this trial. Your time and efforts are very much appreciated, I'm sure, by the parties in the court as well. And so we're ready to commence now with the calling of the first witness for the defense case. Mr. Pryor, who's the witness going to be?
Emma Murray, Judge.
Very well. We'll go ahead and have the witness brought in, please.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
The microphone, and then your first working picture.
Thank you.
May I, Judge?
Yeah, before we get started, I was just sitting here considering whether or not the exclusionary rule applies to this witness, and I don't believe it does. Is that correct?
That's correct, Judge. But in the issue of precaution, my subpoenas stated that nobody was to observe any of the proceedings, and I will inquire Ms. Murray as to whether she observed any of the proceedings anyway, Judge.
Okay, I think it's just fair on questioning for examination on Director Cross, but I won't make any inquiry on the exclusionary order. So with that, I'll just remind the witness then you are under oath for your testimony. You can inquire on direct if you'd like, Mr. Pryor.
Would you state your name, spell your last name for the record for me, please?
Emma Murray, Murray.
And Emma, there's a gentleman to my left in a blue shirt at the desk over there. Do you recognize who that is?
Yes, that's my father.
Now, I noticed that your last name is Murray. Can you explain that to me, please?
I was married and changed my name.
You are married,
Yes, I'm married.
and your husband is Joseph Murray?
Yes,
Did you receive a subpoena from either the prosecutor or the defense in this particular case?
I received a subpoena from both.
And at no point you were called for the prosecution, is that correct?
I was not.
And you did receive a subpoena from my office to appear as well.
I did.
And in that subpoena, did it indicate that we would rather you not review the proceedings as part of this, as part of your testimony in this case?
Yes, and I did not.
I want to talk a little bit about how often we've had an occasion to talk about this case, you and I. And can you explain to the jury how often we've spoken about this case?
I've talked to John maybe 3 times.
And last night we met prior to your testimony today.
That's correct.
At any time, did I indicate to you any way you're supposed to say or anything that you should say or were supposed to say as part of your testimony?
You told me just to tell the truth.
Okay, and you're prepared to tell the truth today.
I am.
I want to talk a little bit about where you're living right now. And where do you live right now?
I live in the house that was my parents'.
Okay. And at this point, you're not aware of any financial situation. Is it true that you're not aware of any financial situation between myself and your father regarding that house?
That's correct.
Okay. And you don't have any personal knowledge of anything that is any arrangement between your father and I, is that correct?
Yeah, I made an arrangement with my father. I don't know what he's decided with you.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your mother's health. What can you tell me in general about your mother's health in the last year or so?
Her health started declining. I was really worried about it. She'd always been one to be able to meet the demands of daily life without being exhausted. And she started going to bed at before dinner some nights. It would be 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. and she would sleep in too if given the opportunity. So suddenly needing to sleep a lot was very confusing to me.
Are you aware of any health issues that your mother may or may not have had?
I, at the time, was not. Since her passing, I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and my maternal grandfather also has sleep apnea, and uh, she's the generational link between. So I wonder if she did. That's something that obviously we can't investigate at this time, but symptoms like daytime tiredness and not getting restful sleep seem like they would fit what speculation.
It's sustained.
Okay. Were you aware of any other health maladies that your mother may have suffered from?
She had anemia.
Okay. Were you aware of any medications that your mother may have taken?
She preferred herbal supplements. She did take the generic form of the medication Prozac.
Okay.
That was the only prescribed medication that she regularly took.
Were there any non-prescription medications or herbs or supplements that you're aware of?
Oh, definitely. She really liked using colloidal silver was her favorite. It's
Slow down for me. Colloidal silver?
colloidal silver. It's distilled water with particles of silver in it to the part per million. It tastes like you're drinking water out of a metal water bottle, and it can cure everything.
Okay. And
I say that with a smile because you really should go to the doctor instead of drinking.
Calls for speculation.
World.
go ahead.
She would use colloidal silver as an antiviral, is what she called it. So anytime she felt under the weather, she would take colloidal silver and she would.
This calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
I witnessed her drinking it and she would encourage other people in our household to do so.
Were you a consumer of colloidal silver?
I was.
Okay. How'd that work for you?
It tastes nasty.
Okay. Did it help you in curing any ailments that you may have had?
I don't know.
Were there other things that your mother did in terms of remedies to resolve other issues she may have had?
She bruised really easily and she used arnica gel.
Okay.
Arnica is a plant that helps with bruising. She had it in gel form.
And when you say she bruised easily, can you elaborate on that?
If she were to bump her hip on the counter when she was walking by, she would get a massive bruise from that. Even things like carrying a heavier load of groceries where the bag pressed on her arm would leave a bruise.
Okay. Okay. I want to go to the date of October 18th of 2019. Do you recall that day?
Yes,
Okay. And on the 18th, you were, and before I get there, your mother was employed at a school. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Now, in terms of the physical size of that school, can you describe the physical size of that elementary school for me, please?
This was a smaller elementary school built in a rural area. The area is growing, but the school is still small. Right now, it houses 3 grades.
Okay. So if there was discussion about having to travel within the school, would that be a significant distance that you would have to travel within this school?
No, I was also employed there at the time, and it was not a hassle to walk from one side of the building to the other.
Okay. And at the time, I'm going to go back to October 18th. And on the 18th, was there some sort of an event or occurrence that was taking place at the school?
The next week, there was going to be a book fair. It was going to be held in the library where my mom worked, and she needed to prepare her workspace to become a store. The community was going to be coming in and buying books, and so she wanted to move her personal items and personal books so that way they wouldn't get sold or stolen.
And in terms of distance from in this small school you described, how far was your classroom to where your mother's library was?
There were 2 different locations where she would work. One was a computer lab that was right next to my classroom. Um, Some people didn't know that, but they shared a wall. You would have to walk around the corner for the entryway, but I could hear her teaching and she could hear me. Her library was just the next hallway over. It was hardly a walk.
When you say hardly a walk, did it encompass miles,
No,
feet?
feet.
Okay. Now, in terms of interaction with other members of the school, how would you describe your mother's personality?
My mother was an introvert at the core. She could be friendly and small talk with people, but in general, I noticed she didn't confide in people. I also observed at that school, we, like many public schools, needed a lot more employees than we had. So most people were overburdened with work, especially support staff. And so she really didn't have time to visit. Even during lunchtime, when you would typically think someone could sit down and chat with a neighbor, she was helping students go through the lunch line and pay.
Would it have been your mother's habit to openly discuss her health issues with members of her school staff?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time were you present when your mother discussed any of her health issues with other members of the school staff?
Any chance that I got to, I would go visit her in her classroom, and I never observed her talking about her health with our coworkers. She seemed pretty embarrassed about.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you observe your mother in terms of her interactions with other members of the school staff?
I did.
And what did you observe?
I did not observe her talking about her health.
Okay. Would you describe your mother as a very private person?
Yes,
Um, would you agree that it wasn't her habit to want to miss work?
she wanted to go every day.
Was that her work ethic or was there some other underlying reason?
Her work ethic, she was also not a salaried employee, so she was paid by the hour.
So it was important financially from your perspective that she work?
Yes,
I want to talk a little bit about the book fair on the 18th and the preparations that were involved. Did you personally observe anything as far as your mother preparing for the book fair?
she loaded her personal belongings in boxes and loaded them heavier than perhaps she should have, because I observed her walking down the hallway and she was resting the box against her body, on her arms, holding it back and walking with a lot of effort. I was in a meeting and I actually stepped out to help her because it was way too heavy for her.
And on that occasion, what vehicle did she drive to the school to load those boxes and unload those boxes?
She drove my parents' Dodge Dakota that day.
Okay. And then I want to go back to approximately 2017 forward. Who was the primary driver of the Dodge Dakota?
My father.
Okay, and what would your mother be driving?
She would be driving a Chevy Equinox. She always liked to drive the nicer of the two vehicles.
Now, there were exceptions to your mother and father switching vehicles. Would that be fair?
That's correct.
But primarily, your dad was the one driving the Dodge Dakota. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Eventually, that truck was sold to who?
My husband and I.
Okay, do you still have that truck?
Yes.
Your mother would use a common phrase in the last year of her life in terms of an assessment of how she would feel. And Yeah.
Yes.
Objection, here calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
were there occasions when you would, well, I think I'll move on from there. That's okay. I want to talk a little bit about the Fitbit. Your mother had a Fitbit, is that right?
Yes, she had a wristwatch that would count her steps.
Okay. And at this point, was it her habit to use that Fitbit on a regular basis?
Yes, she would wear it during the day and then charge it at night
Okay.
when she was sleeping.
So she was counting her steps during the day as part of that Fitbit.
Yes,
And is it your assessment that your mother physically was was in a fit state?
But no, part of why she wanted the Fitbit was to increase her physical fitness.
Okay. She was working on her physical fitness.
Yes, she had one, I had one, and she bought my dad one, but he wouldn't wear it.
I want to talk a little bit about your husband Joe's parents. Who are they?
Ed and Charlene Murray.
Okay. And was there some sort of a competition between your mother and Ed and Charlene Murray?
If you make an account in Fitbit, you can add friends. They're people that you know, and you can compete with them to see who takes more steps during the day.
Okay. And were you aware of any competition that was going on between Ed and Charlene Murray and your mother?
Yes, my father-in-law took a lot of steps during the day, and she wanted to be the winner, and so she would try to beat him.
Would you describe your mother as a competitive person?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. And was there anything unusual with the way your mother operated her Fitbit?
yes,
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time, did you observe your mother using an unusual manner in which to operate her Fitbit?
the Fitbit is designed so that way you walk and it measures your step by your arm moving. You can count more steps than you are actually taking if you shake your arm. And at
Your
nighttime,
Honor, I'm gonna object and voir dire native objection.
You may voir dire, Ms. Blake.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, do you recall visiting with your dad on or about November 17th of last year?
no,
Do you recall a conversation you had with him about the Fitbit and your dad telling you that your mom would hang her arm over the bed and swing it?
I observed my mom do that.
Do you recall having that conversation with your father?
No,
All right, Ms. Blake, is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you can continue, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you. So back to the question, you mentioned in response to Ms. Blake that you observed your mother with her Fitbit, and exactly what was she doing?
she was trying to get more steps to beat my in-laws.
There was a competition.
Yes,
And where did you observe her doing this with the Fitbit?
she had 2 locations where she would do this. She called it exercise.
Okay.
She would be in the living room. She would place an iPad on the back of a recliner and play the game Candy Crush while shaking her arm. And she would also lie in her bed while reading a book on her Kindle while shaking her arm.
Okay. Was it your habit of your mother to read at night?
Yes,
I want to change gears a little bit. And at the time of your mother's passing, where were you living?
I was living across the street, diagonal kitty corner.
Okay, so if there are, my recollection is there's 3 or 4 houses on that corner, is that correct?
Correct.
So your house that you were staying in would have been on what location? The southwest or southeast?
I'm bad with directions.
Okay.
I live close, that house is closer towards Rexburg.
Okay, directly across the street, not diagonally. Is there a neighbor that you know over there?
There's 2 houses. There was a house that Matt and Regan Price were living in.
Okay. And then there's another house on the opposite
There's
side.
another house. I don't know those people though.
Okay. So you were across the street and kitty corner from your father. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Relatively close.
yes.
Okay. Now, there's been some discussion about your mother training for a 5K race. Do you have any information about that?
I was training for a 5K race, but she was not.
Okay, and why do you say she was not?
I invited her to run with me and she told me no, and that she never would.
Okay. Now, there was some discussion about your husband in September sponsoring a 5K race. Do you recall that of 2019?
Yes, he wanted to fundraise for an organization called Operation Underground Railroad, and he organized a 5K race. A similar one had been put on in the community before, and he wanted it to happen again. And so he organized it. My mother helped.
Okay. Well, in helping, did your mother participate in that 5K race?
She did not.
There was a discussion about some previous testimony about someone observing her. I believe it was a principal observing her crossing the finish line. Do you have any personal observations about what you saw that day?
Uh, My mother may have walked across the finish line while helping with the race administration. Was not entered as a participant and she did not go the entire distance. There were some people at the end of the race who were going very slowly, and a group of people walked with them to encourage them to finish. And she may have been with that group, although I don't remember seeing her.
Okay. So what you're saying then is that you may have observed her with some people helping somebody across the finish line, but to your knowledge, she wasn't participating in the race.
That is correct.
She wasn't registered in the race.
She wasn't dressed to run either. She was wearing blue jeans.
And do you specifically remember that from September of 2019?
Yes.
Okay. I want to change the subject a little bit about the clogging and the Zumba high fitness classes. What can you tell me about you and your mother's participation in those classes?
At that time, my mother and I were both overweight and wanted to exercise more. And some ladies at the school invited us to come to a class that they were going to in the evening at a local elementary school in the gym.
Can you tell me when approximately you and your mother started those classes?
We started going in April 2019.
And this was a joint effort to improve both of your fitness?
That's correct.
In your situation, was that shortly after a birth of one of your children?
That's correct.
And I got a lot of heat for suggesting people's weight and size and everything else, but needless to say, you felt personally.
Yes, that is my own words. I was overweight and I wanted to get healthier.
Okay, and your mother, from discussions with her, shared the same view?
Yes, I don't know how much she weighed.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Abstain.
Okay. In any event, the purpose of the Zumba class was for both of you to try to improve your fitness.
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about the level of participation that both of you engaged in as part of those clogging and Zumba classes?
The idea of the Zumba class, high fitness, is that you can participate to whatever ability you're able to. The way that the gym was set up is it was a school multi-purpose room, so it had a basketball court and a stage. Our instructor would be on the stage where everybody could see her moving, and we would mirror her body movements, similar to how you would copy an exercise video at your house. It was just live. We would dim the lights in the room and turn on party lights to make it feel more fun than a typical aerobics class. So it was dark in the room. You could see silhouettes of people in front of you, but you wouldn't really be able to see people around you. That's part of why it was appealing, is if you couldn't dance very well, nobody would make fun of you.
Okay. And in terms of location, where did you generally stand or participate in these Zumba classes?
My mother and I would go to the back of the room.
Was there a purpose for that?
There were different skill levels in the classroom, and we were on the poor end of that spectrum, and so we didn't want people looking at us.
Was it a requirement that you participate fully in every part of the dance or every route? And I don't know what the proper term is, routine or dance?
I think routine is fair, but no, you're not required to. The entire thing is voluntary to even show up and participate.
Okay. Okay. And then as far as the clogging, do you recall how often the clogging classes took place?
We would go once a week on Wednesdays. We went for about 6 weeks.
Okay. And for about 6 weeks?
Yes,
So if I do my math correctly, and you're the teacher, not me, that's 6 times?
just about.
Okay. And then did that continue out? When did the clogging end?
She stopped going when she died,
Okay. And then when did it start?
about 6 weeks before. It was with the beginning of a school year.
So if there's a suggestion by anyone that your mother had been clogging and doing Zumba class for over a year, would that be accurate?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative calls for speculation.
Abstain.
I want to talk a little bit about your mother's other experience. Did she have any self-defense training?
Not through a formal class, but our church would periodically organize uh, evenings, enrichment night, where you could learn different skills. And in Springville, they would routinely have the police show us self-defense skills,
And how often did you do that?
maybe once a year.
And if you were to assess your mother's ability to fight off someone if they were attacking her, how would you rate that?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation and calls for speculation.
Abstain.
Did you ever observe your mother engage in any sort of physical activity where she practiced fending off any assailants?
There's a game on the Wii, a video game system called Exerbeat, and there's a kickboxing portion where you can practice punching.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about life insurance. And I want to mention the name Taylor Ballard. Do you know that name?
Yes, the Ballard Insurance Group offers insurance for our school district.
Okay. And did you have an occasion in uh, uh, September at the start of school to engage in a presentation by the Ballard office?
At one of our faculty meetings, they came and talked to us about life insurance and increasing it. And they showed us that the rates were competitive, or it was really cheap insurance. And so they encouraged us to purchase some. And both my mother and I purchased some at that meeting.
Okay. And at the meeting, uh, was it at the meeting that both of you just elected to purchase the insurance?
Yes,
So prior to that, and I can't remember in September of 2019, I believe you were married at that point. Is that correct?
I was.
Did you consult with your husband before you elected to up your insurance at that point?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Abstained.
Are you aware as to whether or not your mother consulted with the insurance with your father prior to upping her insurance on that meeting day with Taylor Ballard?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Are you aware of whether or not your mother consulted with your father on that day to up her insurance?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
You can answer it.
We were sitting at a table and filled out the paperwork together. We both signed to take out more life insurance on ourselves, and we did not consult with our husbands.
Okay. And at that point, did you take up the maximum amount of insurance that you could purchase at that point?
I did not because I could not afford it. I later did.
Okay, at the next period.
Yes,
But it's your understanding that without discussing with your father, your mother elected to up her insurance to the maximum amount.
I saw her check that box on the paper.
I want to change gears a little bit. And there was some testimony about a Google search for southwest wind. And that would have been on 9/8 of 19. Do you recall that?
I do.
And was that your father who did that search?
That was me.
And what was the purpose of doing that search?
I saw a rainstorm. We were planning an outdoor event, and I wanted to know if those clouds were coming our way. The weather forecast for where we live in Rexburg is sometimes inaccurate because we don't live in Rexburg. So I was trying to be an amateur meteorologist, and the weather app said it was coming from the southwest, and I didn't know if that meant it was coming or going from the southwest. And so I did a Google search on the desktop computer that my parents kept in the living room. That would have been typical at that time. I was late to getting a smartphone, so using a desktop computer would have been more comfortable for me. And it was common just to jump on the computer. There wasn't any login or anything, so it was just getting on the internet.
Okay, and the access to that computer, I'd like you to talk a little bit about where that computer was in relation to the rest of the house.
My parents had two different computers, a PC and a Mac. There's different capacities of each one, and my mom liked different parts of both for the business. So they had one of both, and they were next to each other in the living room. And the screens were set up so that way everybody could see the screen.
And you talked a little bit about your mother and the financial issues. When you talk about and I just had a lapse as to the name of your father's publishing company,
Spring Creek Book Company.
Spring Creek Book Company, and I'm going to mess it up again, so please bear with me. How would you describe the different roles of your father and mother in terms of their participation in the Spring Creek Book Company?
I would say that my dad was the creative side behind it, and my mom was the one that made everything happen with finances and logistics. My dad would find authors or potential authors that could write books, and he would meet with them and give them guidance to write. And my mother would help design book covers. Most of them she did by herself, and she would do the finances and taxes for the company. And they worked together on it. And I don't think they could have done each other's jobs.
But there was access in both of them. Was it necessary for both of them to know the passwords to all of the organizational, for lack of a better word, all of the organization of the Spring Creek Book Company?
Yes, they were both able to log into the required programs.
Okay, there was no need for them to be provided or have someone provide them with the passwords. They were both well aware of them?
That's correct. And my mother also would typically save her passwords. So even if you knew it, you wouldn't need to type it in.
Okay. I want to change gears a little bit. We're going to get back to your father and his artistic side in a minute. But I want to change gears about the physical description of the home that you're now living in. Would it be fair to say that it's a brick house,
Yes,
a one-story,
yes,
that there's a garage?
yes,
Is there an unusual structure that's attached to the back of the garage?
yes. The previous owner constructed a building over the pump house where the well is, the machinery that draws water for the house. And it's unheated. It's built from a different material than the rest of the house. There's not very much electricity that goes to it.
Okay. And did any of your brothers or sister ever use that, and what was the word for that?
Cozy cone,
Cozy, what?
cone,
Cone, C-O-N-E?
yes.
Okay. Is there a time when at least one of your brothers would use the cozy cone?
We all would periodically, the children. We would play musical instruments up there. It was far enough away from the rest of the house that you could play loudly on drums and it wouldn't annoy mom. And uh, you could turn up your guitar amp as loud as you wanted and nobody could hear it. But I would go up there. My brother Mark would. My sister Leah would go up there to study sometimes because it was quieter.
Now, in terms of access to the cozy cone, is it true you have to go through the garage in order to get into the cozy cone?
Yes.
And how would you do that?
Well, you would open the door to go into the garage, walk through the garage, go through another doorway, and you would be in a hallway. And then to go upstairs, you would have to go through another doorway. It was really inconvenient.
Okay. I want to touch a little bit about your father's faith beliefs. And my understanding is you're of the LDS faith
Yes,
and you're a participant, an active participant in your faith. Is that correct?
yes.
How would you describe your father's faith?
I would say very traditional in what he believed. And he would research very carefully and he wanted to stick to as close as the original form as he could. So he was really interested in teachings from Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and similar early leaders of the church.
Would it be fair to describe your father as a fundamental?
Yes,
Okay. Okay, and you didn't share his religious beliefs?
not necessarily.
Okay, some of them you were,
Yes,
some of them that are consistent with your current LDS faith, is that correct?
yes,
Okay, but you would describe him as someone from days gone by, foregone?
yes,
Okay, very traditional?
yes.
Okay, literalist?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Looked at the words and applied the plain meaning of the words?
Yes,
Okay. And there's some theories that you didn't necessarily agree with him, is that correct?
yes.
Would that be a subject of discussion at the dinner table
Uh,
when you were growing up?
Yes,
Okay. And do your brothers and sisters all share your father's fundamental beliefs?
I think they're more similar to me, that there's elements that they might feel drawn to and others that they don't.
Are there elements of your father's faith that you don't necessarily agree with?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. There's been some discussion about the idea of light and dark. Can you describe to me what you understand to be the concept of light and dark?
the phrases good and evil would be talking about your actions, what you chose to do, where light and dark would be talking about your motivations. Light it means that you're acting selflessly like the Savior would be, and dark means that you're selfish, focusing inward like Satan would be.
Okay. Was this something that your mother, from your discussions with your family, shared with your father in terms of her beliefs?
Yes,
So would it be fair to say that your mother's beliefs, to your knowledge, were also of the fundamental or traditional node?
probably more so than him.
Okay. Did she ever have discussions about putting numbers, death percentages or numbers, whether how light and how dark a person would be?
Yes,
Did she do that frequently?
yes.
Okay. Was it particularly about anybody, or was it as her day-to-day activities, she would make comments about that?
As she came across people and observed things, she would mention it.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, you had an occasion personally to deal with your mother's rating system in terms of dark. Is that correct?
Several.
Okay. And was there an occasion when your mother engaged in a practice of trying to rid some sort of dark entity from you?
Yes.
And can you describe what that was about?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Can you describe what that was about, please?
I have struggled with anxiety for years and it was feeling very unmanageable. And I felt like there was a being that was with me. And I talked to my parents about it. And my dad cast it out using the power of the priesthood. And then I felt better afterwards.
Okay. When you say the power of the priesthood, what do you mean by that?
The power of God given by the laying on of hands.
Is that something that has to be specially endowed upon something, or is that some sort of a patriarchal role that someone gets as head of a family household?
Any eligible man can have it
Okay.
if they're living and keeping covenants in the church.
Okay. And on issues of covenants in the church, um, your father's not a perfect person, is he?
No,
And you're aware of a relationship that had been going on, and I'm not trying to embarrass you or cause you some difficulty, but you did subsequently learn that your father had a relationship with another woman,
yes,
and that was not an appropriate relationship.
it was not.
Okay. And at this point, it was, for all practical purposes, having a relationship with Lori Vallow while still being married to your mother.
That's correct.
And would you agree that not anybody's perfect?
Yes,
You're not perfect.
no,
None of us are perfect.
nobody.
So when you say qualified male to help with the dark spirit or the dark entity, what do you mean by that?
Like the procedure to get rid of it.
No, just the type of male. Is it someone who's head of a family, or what is it?
In that case, I wanted to talk to my parents, but because they were my leaders in our family. But any man who is an adult and can make the promises to keep teachings of the church and to use the power to serve other people is eligible to receive it. That wasn't unique to my father.
And then and giving blessings in not your father's faith, but in your faith, it's not uncommon for people to give blessings to each other. Would that be fair?
It's common for people to do that.
And it's common for people to offer to give blessings to people in your faith. Is that fair?
Yes,
And it could come from any direction. Would that be fair?
what do you mean?
Anybody can give another person a blessing,
Yes, as long as the man is eligible.
or anybody can give a blessing to, if you felt, if you felt moved, you could give a blessing to another male. Is that possible?
In the fundamentalist views, around the time of Joseph Smith, there were women that would do that. That's frowned upon today, though.
Okay, so at this point, it's usually the head of the male or a male person who is the one who would generally give the blessing to other people. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, while you were dealing with this dark entity, is it your understanding that when you're going through the process of trying to rid that dark entity or that feeling of, and would you describe it as just a feeling? Would that be a fair way to describe it?
I felt like there is an actual person trying to control me.
Okay. And at that point, after the conclusion of what your mother engaged in and your father engaged in, did you feel relieved or some recovery as a result of that?
I instantly felt better. I felt like the individual that was trying to affect my body was gone.
Okay, and this is something that is not inconsistent with the LDS teachings, light and dark, and these sort of entities. Would that be fair?
And all Christianity in the Bible, the Savior would cast spirits out of people.
Okay. And at this point, as a result of casting out the spirits, does that mean that after they cast the spirits out, you die?
No,
Is there any instant that you can recall in your teachings as part of the fundamental or LDS church where by casting out a spirit, the result is someone dies?
no, the goal of it is so that way you have your own body back and can be in control of yourself.
Okay. Have you ever heard the word zombies?
Just on TV and
Okay.
movies.
Okay. And at this point, are you aware of whether by stating someone's a zombie and you do one of these castings, does that mean the person dies as well?
No,
Okay. And again, part of that casting and removal of the dark entities is also consistent with your LDS faith. Is that correct?
yes,
I want to talk to you a little bit about a subject called the emotion code. Are you familiar with that?
yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
It was developed by a man named Bradley Nelson. The idea of it is that you use,
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Were you aware of whether or not your parents used the emotion code?
yes, they did.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
I would use it.
Anything?
Hold on, before you keep answering, there's an objection that's pending. I am going to sustain the objection. There's been no relevance established for this, Mr. Pryor.
Okay. Well, I was trying to establish by having her talk about the emotion code, Judge.
Well, that's backwards of how we get evidence in, so please see
Okay.
either ask additional foundation or ask another topic.
Do you believe that your father and mother thought they could sense whether a person was light or dark?
Yes,
Was that something that was referred to as the emotion code?
no,
What is the emotion code?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
That's okay, Judge. We'll move on. Did you believe or ever observe your mother reflecting on her ability to identify what people's true intentions were?
yes.
And would you talk to me a little bit about that?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
World.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
My mother learned about muscle testing or reflexology as a child from her parents. and later learned more about it through a class called the Emotion Code. The idea is that you use your body.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. Did you observe which one of your parents was better able to um, apply this issue of this true intentions?
My mother was more skilled at it.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your father's books. And how would you describe your father's novels in terms of fiction or nonfiction?
He did write some nonfiction books and some fiction.
Okay. He also wrote children's books?
Yes.
And the theories and ideas in his books, where do you think he derived most of his inspiration from?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
You may answer.
The Latter-day Saint Church
Okay.
and his own ideas.
Okay. And I want to clarify a little bit. When you say the Latter-day Saint Church, you're not necessarily meaning the current Latter-day Saint Church, are you?
No.
You're referring to what was at some time a more traditional view of some of the readings of the Latter-day Saints.
Yes.
And would you agree that it was your father's intention to sort of, and through his books, discuss some of those theories and express those through his books?
Yes, similar to how historical fiction can teach about the past, he wanted to teach about the future with fictional characters.
Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean as someone like you who's has firm belief in the LDS faith that you would necessarily agree with everything he put in his books. Would that be fair?
Yes, it was an interesting experience to read and to think about what I would do in similar situations, but I did not interpret it to be scripture in any way.
Nor did you interpret it something that you would generally accept or believe. Is that correct?
Correct.
How would you describe your father's personality?
Very introverted.
Much like your mother,
Yes.
without name calling. Would you describe your mother and father as more of a bookworm type?
Yes.
Okay. But your father enjoyed expressing his views about his religious theories, correct?
He enjoyed speaking in front of groups and teaching, but not necessarily talking one-on-one with many individuals. That would be very draining for him. But talking in front of a group and teaching had a different energy about it.
Okay. And your father found great satisfaction in anyone who would take an ear expressing his views. And once he got on the subject, he would.
It was something he was passionate about, and he enjoyed talking about it.
And Judge, if I could just have a moment, I've got more to do, but if I could just recap real quick.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Your Honor. I want to talk to you a little bit about whether or not you know if your mother is familiar with paintball guns.
As a family and like her current family with husband and children,
I'm talking about from her past.
oh, that's a common recreational thing where we grew up in Utah. It wasn't something she enjoyed doing, but she probably went at some point.
Okay, were you familiar with her brother and uncle who were involved in that?
Yeah, she had an older brother and an uncle who was about their age that liked to do adventurous things.
Okay. So at the time, do you recall the incident with the paintball gun incident?
I do.
You recall approximately when the date of that was?
October 9th.
Did you have an occasion to talk to your mother about that?
Yes, I had been with her moments before. She had dropped me off from our clogging class, and then she went home. And she posted on Facebook about it. That's how I learned about it. And I called her immediately.
Okay. Was there any confusion as to what she felt someone was pointing at her?
She was very sure it was a paintball gun.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the day of your mother's passing. And if you need to take a break or use a tissue, please let me know, or water. Please stop me and we'll take whatever time you need, okay? You arrived at your mother and father's home approximately when on that day?
Uh, I don't recall an exact time, but it was before 7 o'clock in the morning.
Did you have an occasion to talk to Coroner Dye?
I did.
Can you tell me what the nature of that not necessarily what Coroner Dye expressed to you, but what you expressed to Coroner Dye?
Coroner Dye was inspecting my mom's body, and she asked us some questions about our wishes, and she offered an autopsy. In the area that we live in, the body would have to be taken to Boise, which is about 5 hours away, and it would delay the funeral. And this is my own personal view. I I don't think autopsies should be done on anyone. And the idea of my mother's body undergoing that was very distressing to me.
Did your father at the time in front of Coroner Dye ever express an opinion as to whether he felt one way or the other about getting an autopsy?
He did not.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, lack of foundation.
If you would rephrase that, Mr. Pryor, to make sure it's something she observed and not through other
Okay.
means.
Did you ever observe your father have a discussion with Coroner Dye on the subject of an autopsy?
My father was very distressed and was not speaking at that moment.
Okay.
He didn't express any opinion.
Okay. Did you express an opinion to Coroner Dye about what your wishes were?
I did not want an autopsy.
Did your father agree with you or disagree, or do you know what kind of a position he may or may not have taken at that point?
He nodded.
Okay. But he wasn't the one insisting, to your recollection, on having an autopsy done, was he?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time, did your father express an opinion as to whether or not he wanted an autopsy or not?
Objection, Your Honor, this calls for speculation.
Overruled.
May I
any-
vote voir dire a native objection?
That's the way it was worded. It's a proper question the court will determine. So go ahead, Mr. Pryor.
Can answer that question, Emma.
Will you repeat it?
Madam Clerk, would you repeat the question for Emma?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. This calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
He never expressed an opinion.
Okay. At the time of the discovery, the passing of your mother, how would you describe your father's emotions?
He was more distressed than I've ever seen him in my entire life. I'm used to, well, at that time I was an adult, but he felt like an adultier adult. I was used to my parents being in control and in charge, and seeing him so distressed and emotionally out of control was very scary to me. And I didn't doubt his grief at all. I'd never seen him more upset than in that moment.
Would you be able to assess whether that was genuine grief or not?
It appeared to be genuine grief.
Is there any doubt in your mind?
No doubt at all.
You understand that at the time he was involved in an affair with another woman, correct?
Correct.
But in spite of that, you still felt that he was genuinely grieved about your mother's death.
But I know that the grief that he felt was real. He may not have had the same romantic relationship with my mother that he had in the past, but I know that he valued her as a person, and seeing her die was very traumatic.
I want to move forward to a trip to California in November. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. And can you give me an idea of approximately when that trip was in November?
it was right before Thanksgiving and
Okay.
over Thanksgiving break.
And in terms of how that trip came about, I would like to start with, you started somewhere in Idaho, is that correct?
Correct.
And who was on that trip?
My father, me, my husband, our son, my sister, her husband, their son, my brother Garth.
So if I go back over that long list, your sister Leah was there
Yes,
with her husband,
yes,
your husband Joe,
yes,
you,
yes,
Garth.
yes.
Garth didn't have his wife at that point.
He
is
was
that-
not married at that time.
Okay. And then in addition, your father.
Yes,
And you left the St. Anthony Rexburg area fair.
yes.
Where did you go?
We drove to the Salt Lake Airport.
Okay. And then from the Salt Lake Airport, what did you do?
We flew to California.
Okay. And then what did you do in California?
We went to Knott's Berry Farm,
Okay. How long of a trip was that?
just a few days.
Was it a Thanksgiving trip of some kind?
Yes,
Okay. And then what was your father's plans after that weekend?
he was going to go live in Hawaii.
Okay. And was that going to be a permanent move?
No,
Temporary?
that's what he said.
Okay. And was there any secrecy applied to that meeting? Was there any way that he was trying to conceal where he was going or what he was doing?
No,
Okay. So it was public airline tickets,
yes,
public transportation,
yes,
public hotels.
yes,
Okay. Public planning.
yes.
Okay. And at some point, was someone else planning on going on that trip with you?
Yes, Lori Vallow attended with us.
Okay. Did she drive from Rexburg, St. Anthony area with you folks to Salt Lake City?
She did not leave the same time we did. And she
Okay,
did not leave from the same location.
okay. Do you know where she left from?
I do not.
Do you know when she arrived with you in California?
She arrived later that night, about 12 hours after we had left. She arrived by vehicle.
Okay. Did you ever find out why she was not going with you folks uh, for the drive to Salt Lake and then the plane trip from Salt Lake to California?
She told me that she was with.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
She told me that she was
on.
with, oh, sorry.
Hang on.
Can answer that.
Was there a discussion with her about what she was planning on doing prior to arriving in California?
Objection, Your Honor, this still calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Was there at any time um, did you learn at any time what Lori Vallow was doing before she arrived at California?
Objection, Your Honor, this still calls for hearsay.
Response, Mr. Pryor?
It doesn't call for hearsay. I'm asking whether she learned of something, Judge. I'm not asking what she said to her.
Your Honor, may I voir dire native objection?
No, I'll overrule the objection. She can answer.
Did you at any time learn of where Lori Vallow was doing on the before she arrived in California?
She told me that she was.
Hang on. I don't want you to say what she told you, whether you learned information.
I learned that.
Objection, Your Honor, this is why it calls for hearsay.
Judge, I'm not again asking for what Ms. Vallow may have said, although I think a statement of a co-conspirator, it comes in anyway.
Well, that is true. Co-conspirator statements do come in.
Your Honor, not from, only as a party opponent, so the state would still object. This calls for hearsay. It's not based on personal knowledge.
Judge, there's no indication that Ms. Vallow is on my side or in any way in support of.
Your Honor, case law is clear.
All right.
Judge, would this
Let
be
me-
a time to take a break?
Yeah, I don't want to have continued argument over this in the juror's presence. I want to make sure that we're going into these types of issues. I get a clear ruling before we continue with objections in front of the jurors. So why don't we go ahead and take the morning recess a little earlier for 20 minutes here, and then I'll hear additional voir dire on this and argument in aid of objection if there is any, and we'll make a ruling before we get back on with additional testimony. So that'll be the time for the morning recess, and we'll go ahead and take the break now.
And may she be excused to, at this point, she's coming back. May she be
Sure,
excused? to-
she can step off the stand and
Thank
take a
you,
break also, just not to discuss her testimony with anyone else, including you, Mr. Pryor.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
All right.
All right, please.
Emma, you can go back. I just can't talk to you.
Over the break here, you indicated case law is clear. I'd like to know if you have any citations for me to consider over the break.
Your Honor, and if I may have a moment to find the brief, this issue was actually pre-litigated when the cases, I believe, were still joined.
Okay.
And so I do have a motion that was previously in a brief that was previously provided to this court on the issue of statements of co-conspirators.
Okay, we'll take the recess and I'll perhaps have my staff attorney, Ms. Stallings, see if you have a citation or a reference to a previous ruling the court's made on the issue and get that before we come back on for argument at some point. Likewise, if there's anything from the defense in support, Mr. Pryor, I'll give you obviously the same opportunity and then we'll argue it on the record before we make
Thank you,
any
Judge.
decision. All right, so we'll be on recess.
All right.
01 D2E, the court finds that does not apply as an exception, so I am going to sustain the hearsay objection. So that'll be the court's ruling.
And Judge, if I could have some parameters, my understanding is that the court is excluding Emma Murray from stating what Lori Vallow told her, but that doesn't exclude me from inquiring as to whether there was a discussion about a particular topic. At least the way I read the rules, that doesn't exclude me from inquiring as to whether a particular topic was discussed with Miss Murray and Miss Vallow. Is that correct?
All right, well, my ruling is limited to the line of questionings that came up. So whether or not, again, it goes into hearsay and eliciting statements made by Lori Vallow that are asserted for the truth of the matter asserted, the court would take those up individually if they come up again. But this is the framework going forward as it relates to comments she may have made. So there may be other exceptions that would apply, and I don't know what comments or statements she made and whether they'd be subject to any other rule. But in terms of the co-conspirator exception, that'll be the court's ruling.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you. That'll be the ruling then on that. And so we'll go ahead and have the jurors return since I know they're ready, and then we'll have the witness please return to the stand. And Mr. Pryor, you can take the podium.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, please. You talk for you, right?
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, the court will note the jurors are returned to the courtroom at this time. We appreciate your patience as we work through an evidentiary matter. We do have Ms. Murray on the stand. I'll remind you, you're still under oath for your testimony. On direct examination from the defense, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue, you may.
I just want to advise you that you can't tell me what someone said and repeat what someone said, but you can answer my questions without telling me what the person actually said to you. Do you understand that?
Yes,
Okay. So it's your understanding that at the Knott's Berry Farm trip, Lori Vallow came from another direction. Is that correct?
Yes,
She didn't participate in the travel plans with you to California. Is that correct?
yes,
At any time, without telling me what she said, was the topic of the location of the children discussed with her?
yes,
Okay. At any time, did you and your father ever discuss his knowledge of where the children might be?
yes.
Okay. What do you understand your father's knowledge of where the children were located during the time that investigators were looking for them?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
From my understanding, and from I was told that the children were in a safe place.
Okay. And was that understanding through your discussions with your dad?
Yes,
At any time, did your dad actually know where that safe place was with your discussions?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. The only way she'd know this is based on hearsay and calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time, did your father ever tell you where he might think the children might be?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Judge, I'm not asking for an answer. I'm asking whether there was a discussion regarding that subject.
May I have a quick sidebar with counsel? All right, thank you, counsel. The court reviewed that previous ruling objection to hearsay. The court is going to sustain the objection.
So at some point, is it fair to say that you had a discussion or multiple discussions with your dad about uh, where the children might or might not be?
yes,
I want to go to the issue of the planning of your mother's service. Were you present at the time for the planning of that service?
yes.
Who was present at that time?
Um, when we first talked about choosing a day for the funeral, we were meeting with the mortician and
Who was that?
it was from he was from Flam Funeral Home. I don't recall his name. And
Were you given a couple of options as to when to have the service?
yes,
And what were those days?
they gave us the choice of Tuesday and Saturday. There were other customers that the funeral home was helping, and those were the only days that they were available to have her ready by.
Okay, so I want to clarify something. Your mother passed on that Friday, Saturday.
Yes,
You're not talking the actual Saturday where the unfortunate time you've discovered your mother. You're talking a week later?
yes, 7 days after that.
So was that a family discussion as to whether or not you would do it on the Tuesday or the Saturday?
Yes,
And then the decision to have the funeral and I'm gonna hack the town again, Springville.
yes,
Is that the name of the town again?
yep, Springville.
Spring Creek, Springville. I'm gonna mess this up, so please forgive me. So the decision to have it in Springville, was that also a family discussion?
Yes.
And the decision was made for Springville as opposed to Rexburg. Why?
My mother had lived in Springville far longer than she had lived in Rexburg, and her family still lived there. And there was a family plot in the cemetery, so it just seemed like the natural decision to bury her there.
Okay. Okay. I want to go back a little bit about the um, the outdoors and your mother's participation in the outdoor activities around the property. Can you elaborate a little bit about what your mother's primary interest and role was in terms of the outdoors?
She loved to nurture things, so taking care of animals and gardening and growing plants. She really wanted to have a strawberry patch and raspberries. She liked cute little critters like ducks and chickens and rabbits, and she would take care of them.
Now, in terms of managing the pet cemetery, was that your father's role or your mother's role to manage that?
My mother's,
Okay, and she was the one primarily responsible?
yes,
So your father didn't necessarily go there and participate in anything with the pet cemetery. Would that be fair?
yes, that's fair.
Okay, so anything that changed or anything that was modified in terms of the pets or pet cemetery, would your mother be aware of it?
She would be aware.
Okay. Okay. And you recall that you've seen some evidence, actually the news, it's been all over the news about an email that your father sent to your mother on September 9th, correct?
Yes,
Mr. Pryor, quick sidebar, please. All right, Mr. Pryor, please continue.
You recall reading an email on September 9th about shooting some raccoons and burying it in the pet cemetery. Is that correct?
it was a text message, I believe, but yes, I did.
Would it be unusual for your father to send your mother a message if he was involved in the something involving the pet cemetery?
Objection, Your Honor. May I vote iron to objection?
You may.
Miss Murray, did your parents tell you about every message they ever sent each other?
No,
Did you look at their phone records routinely?
no,
Did you look through their phones routinely?
no,
Your Honor, this would call for speculation. I'm going to object.
Sustained.
Okay. Again, it was your mother's primary responsibility to manage the pet cemetery, correct?
yes,
And it would be, if your father were to do something in the pet cemetery, uh, would it be unusual for your father to have to let your mother know that he was doing something?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
I'll move on, Judge. You mentioned that you lived kitty corner to the your dad's house. Is that correct?
yes,
And has there been occasions when you folks have also encountered issues with animals on the property?
yes,
And in some of those instances, were those animals buried as a result of being shot
yes,
on your property?
yes,
Okay. And do you have any knowledge about animals being shot on your dad's property as a result of issues with either livestock or otherwise?
yes.
Okay. And some of the animals that were on your father's property at the time, can you go through the list of different type of animals that were on your father's property at that time?
There were a lot of cats. We live right by a busy highway, and so all throughout, there's stray cats that get hit, and my mother would feel bad for them, and they weren't even our cat, and they'd get buried. And some pet dogs, raccoons, skunks, rabbits, ducks, chickens. sometimes sparrows even too.
And your mother was a kind and considerate person,
Yes,
and she felt that that was the reason for why she erected the pet cemetery. Is that correct?
even if it was a pest animal, she didn't want them to be disrespected.
Now, I noticed that when you ran off the laundry list of animals, that during the time period of, let's start with the beginning of November or beginning of 2019 through at the time when your father was accused of this. Are you aware of whether or not your father owned a dog?
But my father did not own a dog. He does not like dogs.
So there was no dog on the property at that point. Is that correct?
Correct.
That they owned.
Oh, that they owned, yes.
You guys had a dog across the street, right?
We did.
Okay. And you don't know whether Regan Price and her family had dogs, right?
They sometimes have, but I wasn't sure at that time if they did.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your feelings about law enforcement in this case. And there's been some mention previously about your, at least indicating that you had some difficulty with law enforcement. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, when I first, I heard from Garth that a detective had come in.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay, you can't say what Garth told you, but I want to talk about your personal experiences in dealing with law enforcement and how you felt about that.
I was aware of an event that had happened with my brother and I wanted to learn more about it. So I contacted the same detective that had talked to him.
Now, in an instant, was it that same detective who talked to you about the exhumation of your mother?
Yes,
And who was that detective?
Detective Hope.
Now, do you recall when you had that discussion about the exhumation of your mother?
December 13th, 2019.
Okay, and at that time, was it your indication that your mother had not been exhumed?
Yes, I thought she was resting in peace, just like we left her.
Okay, and was the subject of the discussion with Officer Hope that your mother in the future would be exhumed?
But he said it had already happened.
Okay. And was that the first time you heard about it?
Yes.
And if you need to take a break, you tell me, okay?
Okay.
At any time prior to your mother being exhumed, did anybody from law enforcement ever tell you that your mother was being exhumed?
No,
Did you ever hear from your mother's family in Springville that they were going to exhume your mother from the ground?
no, nobody knew.
Okay. And to your knowledge, the amount of time, do you have any information as to the amount of time from the minute they started the exhumation to when she was placed back in her grave? How much period of time that was?
At the time, I didn't know.
Okay. Were you ever misled about whether there was going to be an exhumation or not after the exhumation took place?
No,
You were never misled?
I don't understand the question.
Okay. Did an officer ever tell you that they were going to do an exhumation even though it had already occurred?
Yes,
Who was that?
Detective Hope.
Okay. At any time, did the events that led up to your father's arrest cause you to have concern about law enforcement?
Yes,
What kind of concerns did you have with law enforcement?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Did you feel like you were at any time under scrutiny as part of this case?
yes.
What sort of situations was it that felt that you were placed under scrutiny?
Any interaction I had with law enforcement.
Okay, was there an occasion at a gym that caused you particular concern?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Was there a particular situation at a gym that caused you particular concern?
Yes,
What was that situation?
I went to exercise with my sister-in-law
Who
and
was the sister-in-law?
Michaela Daybell,
Okay, that would be who's,
my brother Seth's wife.
okay. I can't keep all of you straight. I'm sorry. And then what transpired at that point? What did you observe?
We were in a section of the gym with lightweight dumbbells, and Detective Hermosillo came and started exercising near us. And it seemed like a part of the gym that would have been too easy for him, and he stood closer to us than felt
Objection,
comfortable.
Your Honor. This is calling for speculation.
Judge, she's describing an event, not speculating about anything.
It's overruled.
Go ahead.
He was standing closer to us than felt comfortable, and it felt like he was trying to listen in on our conversation.
Were there other occasions, either at church or otherwise, where you felt that people were maybe judging you?
Yes,
Give me an example.
I had a detective from Madison County confront me in the hallway at church.
Okay. And was that an uncomfortable situation?
It was really uncomfortable, and I haven't attended that congregation since.
And was that a situation where your role at the church was what at the time?
I was asked to help teach young children in the nursery. And my daughter was in that class, so I was really excited to.
Did this particular detective have some sort of authority over the church or a position in the church that allowed him to dictate whether you were schooling young children or not?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Sustained.
And Judge, if I could have just a moment, please.
You may.
Did you have an occasion to meet with that same Detective Hope at your school?
Yes,
Do you recall when that was?
I only met with him one time.
Okay. Do you recall what the nature of that conversation was?
Um, The idea was I wanted to ask him what was going on, why he was contacting members of my family.
In what regard?
He was asking where my dad was, and we gave him my dad's phone number and told him he was in Hawaii. But they, uh, they said that they had no way of contacting him. That seemed untrue.
Because you had previously provided that phone
We
information?
provided contact information, and they said he was in hiding, but we told them where he was
And when do you recall telling them where your dad was in Hawaii?
at that meeting.
Okay. So a suggestion that you felt that the suggestion that they weren't able to locate your dad and that he was somehow running or hiding was inaccurate?
Yes,
Okay. I want to talk to you about the day that you were present for your dad being arrested. Do you recall that?
yes,
Do you know the day that that was?
June 9th.
Okay. And on that particular day, we've previously seen some videotape of you approaching your father, and it was an emotional situation. Do you recall that?
Yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit about how the car was positioned in relation to the property, your father's property.
It was parked parallel on the side of the road,
What road was that? Do you recall?
200 north.
Okay. So if the car was pointed towards Salem Highway, the nose of it, correct?
Yes,
And the rear was parked down 200, correct?
yes.
So it was pulled over on the side of the road. If someone were to look out the right side of the car window, what would you be looking at?
The house.
If someone were to be looking and turning and looking behind the seat, back towards the trunk or that corner, what would they be looking at?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Overruled.
What would they be looking at?
Whatever was behind the car.
It wouldn't be by turning around and looking back, you wouldn't be looking at the property, would you?
No.
Okay. Now, there was an occasion that during this investigation of your father's property, that your father was over at your home that day. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you have a discussion with your father about what he was intending to do?
Yes.
Did you have an occasion to observe him leave the house?
Yes.
Did he leave the house at that time and I'm going to use a phrase, flee the scene.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Did you observe your father racing off at a high rate of speed once he left the house?
But the speed limit's 50 miles per hour. I saw him drive that speed.
Okay, and he left the house and did it appear to you that he was in a hurry?
No,
Okay. Now you have a recollection of who he was going to see, correct?
yes,
Yeah. And who was he going to see?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Was there a discussion with you being present that he was going to visit a lawyer?
yes,
Objection, Your Honor, move to strike, calls for hearsay, leading.
Sustained, and I'll strike the question and the jury disregard that question.
But in any event, your father was not.
Objection, Your Honor, this is going to call for speculation.
I agree, and it's leading, so sustained.
Okay. Did you observe your father speeding off from the house on the day of June 9th?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
And again, Judge, if I could have a minute. On the day of your mother's funeral, how would you describe your father's reaction?
typical for any grieving Latter-day Saint husband.
Does that mean?
He cried. He also seemed happy at moments.
And when you say typical, what do you mean? Is that typical?
Latter-day Saints believe that we will be resurrected and be with our families forever. So a funeral isn't saying goodbye forever. It's a see you later. It's a break.
So would it be fair to say that he had mixed emotions, both positive and negative emotions?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Would it be fair to say that he had mixed emotions?
Yes,
Judge, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pryor. All right, Ms. Blake, cross-examination.
Miss Murray, is it okay if I call you Miss Murray?
yes,
Mr. Pryor started off saying that he told you to tell the truth here today. Do you recall that?
yes,
And you said you'd met with Mr. Pryor maybe 3 times.
that I recall.
You've been talking with your dad almost daily over the last several years, correct?
Yes,
Lots of conversations with your dad.
yes,
Do you recall your dad in early June of 2020 telling you not to cooperate with law enforcement?
I don't remember him saying that.
You don't remember a phone call in which he relayed to you, probably better if you just don't cooperate?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember then telling the FBI you were not going to meet with them anymore?
I chose not to do that because of counsel from another attorney.
But it was after having that conversation with your dad, correct?
No,
Was it after June 9th of 2020 that you told him that?
yes,
After June 10th of 2020 that you told him that?
I don't remember.
Do you recall visiting with your dad as well?
Yes,
Do you recall a visit on around November 23rd of last year?
not specifically.
Do you recall having a visit where you and your dad talked about that 5K race?
Yes,
And do you recall your dad telling you that you might want to say certain things?
no,
You don't recall that?
no,
Do you recall then talking about a race in 2013?
yes,
You recall your dad saying, once again, maybe say that?
no,
Do you recall your dad talking to you about the one that exercised with you at Zumba that Tammy wasn't able to keep up? She would just make up her own moves. Do you recall your dad telling you that?
no,
But you've had a lot of visits with your dad,
yes.
so it may be hard to remember everything he's told you.
He's never told me to say anything.
So you don't recall him telling you those things.
No,
You talked about you were worried about your mom's health,
yes,
but your mom went to a doctor, right? She'd been there for a wrist recently.
just for the wrist.
Surprised you to learn that no mention of current anemia in her medical records?
Because she hadn't been to the doctor since 2017.
When did your mom go to the doctor for a wrist?
In 2019, that's a
Okay.
2-year gap.
You just answer the question. So when did your mom go for her wrist?
In 2019,
Her medical records say nothing about current anemia. Does that surprise you?
yes,
Her medical records say nothing about sleep apnea, correct?
uh, I don't know.
Would it surprise you that they don't say anything about sleep apnea?
No,
Talked about your mom going to bed early. Again, what time did you say she'd go to bed?
it varied depending on the day, but 5, 6, 7 o'clock,
Were you over at the residence when she'd go to bed?
usually,
Would you go in and visit with her?
if she was awake.
Would you go watch her while she was in bed?
No,
So you don't know what she did when she went to bed. Fair to say?
fair.
So you don't know what she would do with the Fitbit when she went to bed, right?
I watched her do it several times.
Several times. You didn't watch her nightly go to bed.
I did not.
You say your mom went to bed that early, 6, 7, 7 at the latest. Is that your recollection?
On some nights, she probably stayed up later.
How much later?
I don't know.
Because you weren't there, right?
Correct?
So surprise you to learn that on October 18th, there was activity on her phone at 10:22 PM.
No,
That's a lot later than 7.
she had been sick that night. I stay up later when I'm sick and have just thrown up as well.
Were you there that night?
No,
Did you see her throw up?
no,
So you don't know.
nope,
You only know what you were told.
yes,
You were asked about this book fair. And you talked about your mom carrying a heavy box. Do you recall that?
yes,
But your mom was carrying the box, right?
yes,
So she was able to carry a box,
barely,
but she was doing it, correct?
yes,
You were asked about who drives the Dodge Dakota. Do you recall that question?
yes.
Any reason why your husband would have referred to the truck keys as your mother's?
They had 2 sets. And the set that my husband used was my mom's.
Any reason why he would have to get those keys from your mom?
Yes,
Why was that?
he wanted to borrow the truck to work potato harvest, and she was the closest of my 2 parents to him.
So they both had keys to it,
Yes,
both access it,
yes,
both could drive it.
yes.
You talked about your mom playing on the Wii. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And what kind of game was that again?
an exercise game.
Did you see her do that a lot?
In 2018 and earlier.
Was that something that she enjoyed?
Yes,
Fair to say your mom enjoyed physical activity?
she enjoyed video games.
And when you say video games, some of them, you described the Wii. Were there other types of video games your mom liked?
Yes,
And what were those?
farming simulations, Pokemon.
Would she play those on her phone? Do you know?
Yes, and other handheld devices.
And then she liked to play the Wii as well.
Periodically.
And she took self-defense classes.
Not formal classes. It was with our church.
But was that a voluntary thing?
Yes,
So she wanted to go do that.
yes,
And that's physical activity.
yes,
She wanted to participate in Zumba, correct?
yes,
She wanted to do clogging.
yes.
She was training for a 5K.
No,
You say she wasn't training for a 5K.
she was not training for a 5K.
Would it surprise you that other people said she was?
No,
We talked earlier a little bit. You weren't privy to all your mom and dad's communications, right?
no,
You weren't privy to all your mom's conversations that she'd have with people, correct?
correct.
So at school, she may have conversations when you weren't around, right?
Yes,
She may tell people things that you have no idea she told them, right?
yes,
And council talked to you about an insurance policy that was increased. Do you recall that?
yes,
And you said your mom did that on her own.
yes.
Why was your dad's signature on the application?
I think she took out insurance on him.
Your Honor, may I be handed State's Exhibit 151?
Yes.
And Your Honor, may I ask that the witness be shown this exhibit?
You may. I'll have the marshal please retrieve that.
And I don't know if council needs to see this as well.
I'm good, Judge. Thank you. I'm good. No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Ms. Murray, if you can just look that over. Did you have a chance to look that over?
Yes,
Do you see on the back page whose signatures were there?
yes.
And whose are those?
It says employee signature, Tamara M. Daybell. Spouse's signature of applying for coverage, Chad G. Daybell.
And do you see dates by those?
9/8/19.
Is it the same date on both signatures?
Yes,
And can you see that that's only insurance for your mother?
yes,
Your Honor, may I be handed that exhibit?
Yes, I'll have the bailiff retrieve that, please.
And permission to publish from the Elmo.
You may publish.
And Miss Murray, can you see which company this is through?
Yes.
And what company is that?
Life map?
And then do you see kind of towards the bottom, a box marked with an amount?
Yes.
And what is that box?
80,000?
And then is this back page the page you were just looking at?
Yes.
And Miss Murray, I believe you indicated that your parents would share their passwords with each other.
Yes.
So is it fair to say that they could access each other's accounts?
Yes.
So your dad could delete emails or block contacts on your mom's account?
If he knew how.
And you were asked about whether or not your mom was familiar with paintball guns. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And who is Garth Daybell?
Garth is my older brother.
Would it surprise you to learn or to hear Garth say that she wasn't familiar with paintball guns?
I don't think he said that.
Would it surprise you if he did?
Yeah, that would surprise me.
Did you ever shoot paintball guns with your mom?
No.
Ever see your mom with a paintball gun?
No.
Ever see your mom with a rifle?
No.
Ever see your mom with an assault rifle?
No.
And counsel talked to you about when you learned your mother had been exhumed. Again, do you recall approximately when you learned that?
Yes.
And when was that again?
December 13th.
And you talked about a meeting that you had with Detective Hope. Is it that same meeting?
Yes.
And do you recall at that meeting, Detective Hope inquiring of you or letting you know that they were still concerned with the whereabouts of JJ Vallow?
Yes.
Do you recall him telling you that they were still looking for him?
Yes.
You talked about seeing Detective Hermosillo at the gym sometime. Do you recall approximately when that was?
It was after my dad had been arrested, so sometime after 2020 or during that year.
And when you met with Detective Hope, do you recall him telling you that all they wanted to see was JJ was safe and find out where he was located?
Yes.
Do you recall indicating that you were in contact with your dad at that time?
Yes.
Did you ever ask your dad where JJ Vallow was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was in a safe place.
Did you ever ask your dad where Tylee Ryan was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
In a safe place.
Do you know where JJ and Tylee were found?
Yes.
Where?
In the backyard
Of whose property?
of my dad's property.
You indicated that you live kitty corner to your parents, or that you did live kitty corner to your parents' residence. Is that right?
Yes, I used to.
What direction was that from your parents' residence?
Um, it was towards Rexburg, which I believe is to the south. Southwest.
And you indicated that on September 8th, you were searching for southwest wind.
Yes,
So you happened to be searching for southwest wind the last day Tylee Ryan was seen alive?
yes,
The day before Alex Cox or a device associated with him was on your dad's property.
yes,
The day before your dad sent your mom a message about shooting a raccoon and burning limbs on that property.
yes,
We talked about your dad, some of the things that he would teach you, including light and dark. Do you recall that?
yes,
Have you tried to discern light and dark?
yes,
Did your dad ever teach you about zombies?
no,
Did he ever teach you about castings?
yes,
And I think you talked about your mom doing something like that.
yes,
Is that correct?
yes.
Would you qualify that as a casting?
What my mother would do?
Yes.
Yes,
And you said that it helped you.
yes,
Are you still alive?
yes,
Did your dad teach you about multi-creations?
yes,
You said he didn't teach you about zombies.
yes,
I think you said your dad was passionate and he enjoyed talking about his views.
yes,
Your dad ever talked to you about death percentages?
yes,
Did your dad ever talk to you about people being close to death?
yes,
Do you recall any specific people your dad talked to you about being close to death?
yes.
And who was that?
Um, Well, my mom was one of the people, but it was not death so much as how connected your spirit was to your body. My mom would feel lightheaded and say she didn't feel quite connected to herself, and they would reconnect her spirit to her body.
When your dad would talk to you about castings, did he explain to you anything about the body having to die?
No,
Explain anything to you about the body having to be destroyed?
no,
And again, didn't talk to you about zombies.
no,
Were you privy to all your dad's conversations with people?
no,
But your dad liked to share his views, correct?
yes,
Your dad ever talked to you about Alex Cox?
no,
Did your dad ever talk to you about Lori Vallow before your mom passed away?
no,
So you don't know what he talked to Lori and Alex about.
I don't.
And counsel talked to you about some of the books your dad writes. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Have you read a lot of his books?
all of them.
So are you aware in his autobiography that he indicates the visions in his books are true? Things
Ye-
that he's seen?
Yes,
And is it fair to say the books were they sold at religious bookstores?
yes,
So some people may have put more stock into them.
yes,
And you, counsel talked to you about priesthood blessings a little bit. Do you recall that?
yes,
And I think you made the statement, a man living the covenants would be worthy or could give a priesthood blessing.
yes,
Is committing adultery living the covenants?
no,
When did you learn that your dad was having an affair with Lori Vallow?
after he was arrested.
Was it quite a while after he was arrested?
Well, I heard about things in the news after Lori was arrested in February of 2020, but I learned more after he was arrested, very shortly after, once again, the news.
Do you recall participating in an interview where you indicated that you didn't believe he'd had a physical affair?
Yes,
And that was about sometime in 2021?
yes,
Did you know of the physical affair at that point?
no,
So it was sometime after that that you learned of the physical affair?
yes.
And then I do want to talk to you a little bit about the day that your mom passed away. Were you present at the residence when 911 was first called?
No,
When you arrived at the residence, who else was there?
my father, my older brother Garth, my husband, uh, sheriff's deputy. There may have been two, but I remember one that walked with me from my house. And the coroner was, I think, arriving the same time that I was. I can't remember if she was there before me or not.
Were you, is it fair to say your dad had conversations possibly outside of your presence?
Yes,
Were you there when your dad was providing your mom's medical history to Deputy Greenalch, the officer?
yes,
Were you there when he provided it to Deputy Coroner Cammy Wilmore?
yes,
And were you there when he provided it to Coroner Brenda Dye?
yes.
Did you provide any statements about your mom's health at that time?
I don't remember.
You said that you had serious concerns about her health though, right?
Yes,
But you don't remember if you said anything.
she wasn't talking to me, so I didn't answer her.
At any point, did you reach out to law enforcement to tell them about any concerns you had about your mom's medical conditions?
It wasn't a crime, so no.
You were asked about when your mom was exhumed. Did you know there was going to be an autopsy?
Um, I assumed there would be.
Did you reach out to anyone then to let them know of your concerns?
Family members.
Did you reach out to law enforcement?
No, I didn't feel like they would help me since they were the ones conducting it.
But you didn't reach out to them with any concerns.
No,
And you said you didn't want your mom to get an autopsy. Is that correct?
correct.
Once you learned she'd had one, did you want to see the results?
I did.
Do you recall law enforcement coming to meet with you and you telling them, nope, I don't want to know?
I didn't say that.
Do you recall telling them you didn't want to know?
I don't recall that, so no.
Do you recall not being willing to have them share with you the results of the autopsy?
Judge asked and answered it just in a variety of different ways.
Overruled.
Do you recall indicating you did not want to sit down or that you were unwilling to sit down and have them share the autopsy results with you?
No,
You don't recall that.
that's not what I said.
What did you say?
I told them I didn't want to interview with them. I wanted to see the results, and I did not want to discuss it with them.
And do you recall them indicating you wouldn't have to do an interview? They were just going to share the results with you.
They never said that.
Did you in fact decline to see the autopsy?
No, they never offered to let me see it without interviewing with them.
So you were unwilling to sit down with law enforcement.
In that instance, yes.
I think you talked about the morning of your mom's passing, it was difficult to see your dad not in control and in charge.
Yes,
Was it pretty common for your dad to be in control and in charge?
yes, as the patriarch of our home.
And you were asked about how your dad seemed when your mom passed away. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Did your dad ever share with you a text to Lori
no,
that was sent on less than 24 hours after your mother's passing on October 20th of 2019?
my dad didn't share text messages with me.
So would it surprise you to learn that your dad texted that he was sad, but not for the reasons everyone thought?
Well, when I
It's a
first,
yes or no?
oh,
Would it surprise you to learn that?
no,
And council talked to you about the events of June 9th of 2020. Do you recall that?
yes,
And do you recall speaking with your dad on that morning?
yes,
And Your Honor, I'm going to ask to be handed States Exhibit 300.
Very well. Okay. Ms. Blake, if you could make some identification in the record before publishing, so we can ensure what is being published.
Yes, Your Honor. And it was indicated that there may be an A and B, so I want to verify before publication as well that this is the correct one.
All right, thank you.
Sorry if I may have just a moment. And Your Honor, this is 300A. It is the body cam video from Detective Wheeler that was previously admitted.
Very well, thank you, Ms. Blake.
And I would ask permission to publish from approximately minute 1 Well, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 44 seconds.
Okay.
Sorry, just another moment.
All right, everyone, if you'd like, we can take a stand up, not leave, but stand up break.
Thank you. For some reason, it did not like my computer today. So now starting from 1 hour, 2 minutes, 56 seconds.
Dr. Chad, just stay here with her. So you understand why I have to do that?
Yeah.
So you just stay here with them. Okay.
Hi. They said I could talk with you and I didn't want you to be alone. I love you so much.
Glad you came over.
I thought they had taken you downtown already.
I got them out to the Carolina County line.
We saw it as soon as you left. They chased you down and then they came back.
Ron,
Ron?
just concerning the car,
Huh?
I know
I
they,
asked him
oh,
about
okay,
it.
What's that?
just about the car.
Oh, we'll take care of the car. We're gonna take
Is
it.
she able
and we will-
to get it?
Yeah, you can do that. We may have to go through the car, if you're arrested in it,
Right,
these things we gotta do, but then.
she can have her bananas and her,
I gave him
First.
food.
We'll try to get a car before it's 40.
You can eat it.
so Eric, or Ron, so I like my wallet, will that be able for her to pick up, or could I turn that over to her right now?
Is that in the card that here?
It's right here.
That's up to you. I don't see, can I look through it? Just make
Sure.
They're going to get marked.
Lisa.
No,
Oh.
Is there anything that you're gonna need in that?
Well, she'll be running my finances, I suppose, so. That has a little money on it, you could,
Okay, so these are credit cards, so you're good if she just takes it,
yeah.
correct?
um, In the middle drawer on the left side in Mark's room, there's about $9,000 in 2 white envelopes.
Okay.
So get that. Yeah, so we'll talk more about car payments and stuff, but you have that password.
I do.
I believe the Hawaiian,
That's this one.
First Hawaiian Bank, if you use that same password for this account, it's Chad Daybell. That's what else is in here. Producer there. This has nothing on it. It's like $6. That has to go away. So this, okay, in that same drawer. Is a piece of this that would fit in here, and it's got the company card, company business card. And so just make sure you get that.
And this is all in Mark's room.
Yeah, I put that in there. There's like a pamphlet with a guy who's sitting in a car. It's for the Wells Fargo auto loan.
That's the loan that they went on.
Yeah, and so that we'll talk about. So this has, if you go to Telmate, this is the card that's used.
Okay.
And so all you really do, you could probably just sign in as Chad.Daybell or start your own.
I have an account that I've been talking with Lori on.
Okay. But you could use this
To
card,
add money. to
yeah, and to her if needed.
it. Okay.
So, yeah, she'll need to still have commissary money. Usually puts 30 a week in there. So. And you can probably talk to her too.
Okay.
Mhm. I'm sorry.
I love you so much.
Cooperate with them as much as you feel. I mean,
They've been kind to us today. I texted John Pryor, so he has my number. He said thank you.
okay. And a lot of the company stuff that pays for the house should just auto pay still out of that company account.
Hey.
And I left 5,000 in there.
Here,
Okay,
if you need something, come find me.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions you have?
I think, well, it sounds like you're not gonna be out. in a little
Right.
while. So I think my landlord texted me just to feel bad for me. I think I'm gonna come over here.
That's what I needed you to say, because, yeah, you and Joe and whatever Mark wants to do, you should stay with either you
I'll
or me.
take care of Mark. I'll take care of me. That's the card. I will, Dad. They'll take care of me. We'll take care of you the best we can. Sorry to interrupt.
So keep paying the mortgage out of the company.
Okay,
No, you can probably set it up though.
okay.
I'm trying to, it's Wells Fargo. In that same pamphlet. Remember the password,
I'll look,
but
but I've had a lot of success with mom stuff, just saying, will you help me? My mom died. I'm pretty sure, will you help me? My dad's in jail. That's the same.
it should be paid through July 1st.
Okay,
And I think the car is paid through July 15th. So you shouldn't have any bills to worry about. Yeah, I'm not coming back. So all that stuff that's in the baby room is Lori's and mine. The suitcases you'll see in the box. Just put it in the garage, I guess, after.
store it, see what happens.
You guys can. Yeah, take that mattress from upstairs, I guess, do what you want, put the books back on the shelf. We're gonna make it through. I'm glad we could talk. I'm glad they let you come over.
I started crying and Lieutenant Ball went, do you want to talk to him? And I'm like, can I? And he said, he's just over there. Like, oh, that changes things. You probably saw us out
Yeah,
there.
I was watching. So, hopefully things will slow down for you guys and get left alone. But yeah, they'll let you move out of there. You just get over here. You know, get gosh,
Well, I
it still feels better.
I would be moving soon. That's what the spirit was telling me, but I didn't know how it all, I felt like I needed to learn more.
Mm,
And now I get it.
So yeah, this is essentially the house, and we'll talk to John Cryer about the financial arrangement, but you should be fine for a while.
I think long enough to get on her feet.
And stopping at 111:54. Do you recall this conversation with your dad?
Yes,
And when you first walked up, your dad didn't ask you if you knew why he was arrested, did he?
no,
Do you recall a conversation in there about moving a mattress from upstairs and putting the books on the shelves or something along those?
yes.
Where was the upstairs?
It was in the top of the cozy cone.
So there was a mattress in there?
He had just barely put it there. Typically, no one lived up there. It's like the one time of year that the temperature actually cooperated. There just wasn't room at the house. There's a lot of people living there at the time.
So there was an upstairs that had room for mattress though.
Yeah,
And there was some talk in there about some cash that he wanted you to have. Do you recall that?
yes,
And he talked to you about how to pay the mortgage
yes,
and talked to you about letting you take the car.
yes,
And prior to that, or around the same time, do you recall him making an $8,000 deposit into your account?
yes,
Do you recall conversation that day about a body being located?
yes.
And do you recall then a conversation about a second body being looked for?
A conversation with my dad?
Yes.
Yes.
Whose bodies were those?
Tylee, Ryan, and JJ Vallow.
I have nothing further.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Pryor, redirect. 151. Okay, we've got that. We'll have it presented.
Counsel, do you want this? I can keep it if you'd like. No? No, sure. Thank you. And Judge, may I publish?
Yes.
Thank you. On the Elmo. Emma, I'm looking at the life map insurance. And is that the one you talked about with Taylor Ballard?
Yes,
You previously testified that your dad would sign if he was also applying for coverage. Do you recall that?
yes,
Could you do me a favor under your dad's do you recognize which one is your dad's signature there?
yes,
Second one, right?
yes.
Below your mom's? And would you read starting with spouse's signature?
Spouse's signature if applying for coverage.
And what did you understand that to mean?
Um, Either my dad was applying for coverage or my mom didn't read the directions.
But it was your understanding at the time that the decision and the amount of coverage was a decision your mother made at that time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the prosecuting attorney, Ms. Blake, talked to you about whether your dad discussed with you where the children were, correct?
Yes,
Okay. Was there ever a discussion with your dad that Lori Vallow was concealing the location of the children from everyone?
yes,
And as part of that, your dad never knew where the children were. Is that correct?
yes,
What he did know is that Ms. Vallow had indicated to him that the children were safe.
yes.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay and speculation.
Well, it's untimely, overruled.
So is it your understanding that your dad never knew where the children were, but only that they were safe?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay and speculation.
Sustained.
I want to talk lastly about one other subject that the prosecuting attorney brought up. She mentioned to you that why you never brought up an issue about your mother getting an autopsy. Do you recall the day that your mother was exhumed?
I think it was December 11th,
Okay, and then the first time you learned about an autopsy and that your mother had been dug out of the ground would have been on what day?
December 13th.
So do you think that it would have been practical for you after they conducted the autopsy and dug your mother out of the ground to file an objection or complain?
It was already completed.
I have nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right. I will conclude the testimony of this witness then. Thank you for appearing. You can go ahead and step down. Can she be released from any subpoena, counsel?
Judge, in the event something comes up during the testimony, I'd like to keep her under subpoena at this point.
Okay, and that's fine. You are still under subpoena, so you may be subject to return. You're not subject to the court's order on exclusions, so you can talk to counsel if you have any questions about that. And thank you for appearing again. My preference would be to get started with another witness before we take